Of chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. It is Friday, May the 3rd, and we are coming to you live right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas, on social media, on the Facebook page, the Rock Health and Wellness Centers. We're on YouTube at Health from the Rock, and we are on X at Dr. Jason Clemmons. I think that's what it is. Yeah, Dr. Jason Clemmons. And then we're also live right here on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. We've had a fantastic week at The Rock, just like always. And we've had some good shows this week. Last night, we got a little bit intense. And I'm not going to apologize for that because I think you're worth it. I think it's that you're worth it for somebody to get a little intense every once in a while. Try to say, hey, look, let's do some healthy things so you can save your life, save the life of your family, make your life better. So that's what we did last night. If you want to go back and check that out, we talked about disc bulge versus facet. We talked about omega 6-3 ratios. That was the two big things that we talked about because I got those asked of me yesterday. So tonight, we've been trying to get to this book since Wednesday. And these two books, we're just going to get right after it tonight because there is so much in here. This is The Grain Brain by Dr. David Perlmutter, MD, and this is The Brain Maker by Dr. David Perlmutter, MD. So we're going to get to these books. I promise you tonight, that's the only thing I got on my agenda for this evening is to get you the information out of these two books, and I think it's going to be fantastic for you. And it's going to be fantastic for me because it sounds like a health and wellness chiropractor is giving you all this information. And actually it's a board certified neurologist, MD, that's going to give you this information. Before we start, I got one thing to say. Every other Friday, I get a massage from Lori Ann Randy. And you guys, if you're looking for a massage therapist, she does a fantastic job. She really does. She is if you're not a big, you can talk to her if you want to. If you're not a big talker, I don't think I said a single word in this entire the entire 90-minute massage that I got with her today, and it was so relaxing. She does such a great job. And her number 806-392-0528. 806-392-0528. She's in a little office complex. It's right behind Star ER on Indiana, just inside the Loop in Lubbock, next to Orlando's over there. Right behind there, that's where she is. And if you guys are looking for a massage therapist, I highly recommend Lori Ann. She does a great job. Man, I enjoyed my massage today. So got some people adjusted. Got our workout in this morning. About killed myself again, but that's the fun part of doing these workouts. It was so funny how all of the negotiation. I was telling one of my other patients who's a CrossFit trainer, has her own gym and that she started. And I was talking to her today, and I said, it's so funny how many negotiations you have in the middle of a workout. When you you just start talking, you're just like, I can't breathe. I think I'm going to die. No, I'm not really going to die. Go faster. Oh, well, I think I might just slow down on this set right here and conserve a little energy so I can make it through the workout. And then it's like, nope, shut up, go faster. And so it was, I was having those today, having some of those, I was having a little trouble breathing at one point. Yeah, so that's what happens when you do high intensity exercises, but you only have to do them twice a week, and you can do them for 20 minutes and then get on with your life. And that's exactly what I do. I work out twice a week for 20 minutes, and it's great. And so far as I could tell, everything's good. Now, I also try to make sure I take my vitamins. I also try to make sure that I don't eat any processed foods or refined carbohydrates. And so I hadn't had a piece of bread in over 2 years, or any rice, pasta, pizzas, ice cream, candies, nothing. So you can do it. It's a great life. It really does make your life better, makes your body healthier. And that's what goes along with the book. So let me just give you a little background on David Perlmutter, MD. And I'm getting this right off of the Institute for Functional Medicine website. You could look him up, ifm.org, and go to personnel, David Perlmutter, MD, FACNABIHM. I don't know what those mean. Fellow of the Academy of I don't know, something neurology, probably. Dr. Perlmutter is a board-certified neurologist and 5-time New York Times best-selling author. He serves on the board of directors and is a fellow of the American College of Nutrition. There you go, that's what it is. Dr. Perlmutter received his MD degree from the University of Miami School of Medicine, where he was awarded the Leonard G. Roundtree Research Award. He serves as a member of the editorial board of the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease and has published extensively in peer-reviewed scientific journals, including Archives of Neurology, Neurosurgery, and the Journal of Applied Nutrition. In addition, he is a frequent lecturer at symposia sponsored by institutions such as World Bank and IMF, Columbia University, Scripps Institute, New York University, and Harvard University, and serves as an associate professor at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. Dr. Perlmutter's books have been published in 32 languages and include the #1 New York Times best-selling Grain Brain. And that's what we got right here is the Grain Brain. So, surprising truth about wheat, carbs, and sugar with over 1 million copies in print. Other New York Times bestsellers include Brain Maker. That's what we got right here. We're also going to go about it. The Grain Brain Cookbook, the Grain Brain Whole Life Plan, and Brainwash, co-written with Austin Perlmutter, MD. He is the editor of Microbiome and the Brain, authored by top experts in the field and published in December 2019 by CRC Press. So, the first thing that you might want to ask yourself is, why is a board-certified neurologist, why would he go back after becoming a board-certified neurologist and become a fellow of the American College of Nutrition? Like, why would a brain guy go back and study nutrition and become a fellow of the American College of Nutrition? And I think there's something to learn from that. I mean, I think I really do. I think there's something that we could learn from that and say, hey, look, a guy that knows pretty much everything there is to know about the brain, which everybody that follows this show knows that's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke right there, because we all know that there's just a little piece that we know about the brain, right? But he knows as much as anybody else does about the brain. He's a board-certified neurologist, for goodness sakes. And he's a professor at the University of Miami School of Medicine. So he's a teacher, and he's an author, and he's a clinician, and his dad was a neuroscientist. I'm pretty sure that's what I read in this. We'll get to it tonight. I vividly remember when I was 5 years old and my father suddenly became weak. At the time, he was a busy neurosurgeon, covering 5 or 6 hospitals while at the same time being dad for his 5 children. Yeah, so his dad was a neurosurgeon. So why would those two things fit together? Well, because what you eat determines the function of your brain. Fuel and activation, right? We talk about it all the time on the show. Fuel and activation. So I'm just going to read some of this. I'm going to start chapter 3 of the book and the Grain Brain, because I want you to hear this. I want you to hear some of this stuff, because it's going to be a slap in the face to some of the things that you've been taught and what you are dealing with, especially when it comes to fats and cholesterol. And I think it's just so important that we understand it. This is a 2013, I think we said, copyright book. Yeah, 2013 copyright book, and I think the Brain Maker was 2015 or 16 copyright book. So it's just something, when I was going back to review it, I say this all the time, but the people in my business, the people in wellness, they get the same things. Like, you're going to hear this. You're going to hear what we talk about all the time, and you're going to hear it from a neurosurgeon. So I'm just going to read it from the book. I'm just going to read these passages, and so that you can kind of understand it. Chapter 3. We went over a little bit of chapter 3 the other night, I'll just read it. We'll get into it, and hopefully we can make it kind of fun as we're going through it. But he says some of my most remarkable case studies involve people transforming their lives and health through the total elimination of gluten from their diets and a new appreciation for fats instead of carbs. I've watched this single dietary shift lift depression, relieve chronic fatigue, reverse type 2 diabetes, extinguish obsessive compulsive behavior, and cure many neurological challenges from brain fog to bipolar disorder. But apart from gluten, there's much more to the story of carbohydrates in general and their impact on brain health. Gluten isn't the only villain. To shift your body's biochemistry to one that burns fat, including the kind of that never goes away, tames inflammation, and prevents illness and mental dysfunction, you need to factor in another big piece of the equation: carbs versus fats. So he's gonna get into it, but I'm gonna skip over just a little bit because there's just so much that I want to try to get covered tonight in the book. This is part of the chapter says fat genes and fat science, PHAT. All of the lessons in this book, the ones I hope you take seriously, is the following: respect your genome. Fat, not carbohydrate, is the preferred fuel of human metabolism and has been for all human evolution. Now he's got the evolution thing going on. So, but we have consumed high fat diets for a long, long time. And it's the only since the advent of agriculture, which wasn't but a few thousand years ago, that we've have become abundant in our food supply. We still have a hunter-gatherer genome. It's thrifty in the sense that it's programmed to make us fat during times of abundance. And what he says right there is really important for us to understand. The way that we're built is to make us fat in the time of abundance because there wasn't much abundance back in the day. There was very little abundance, as a matter of fact. And so um, you've the that's why I always say that the reason people eat donuts is because they were hungry 100 years ago. They didn't eat donuts because they made a choice between donuts and breakfast burritos and pancakes and waffles and some smoothie or something like that. No, that's not why they ate donuts. They didn't have all those choices. They ate whatever the heck they could get because they were hungry. And they did that for a long period of time, right? But before that, we have a genetics that is designed, if we have abundance, it's designed to make us fat. The thrifty gene hypothesis was first described by geneticist James Neal in 1962 to help explain why type 2 diabetes has such a strong genetic basis and results in such negative effects favored by natural selection. According to the theory, the genes that predispose someone to diabetes, thrifty genes they call them, were historically advantageous. They helped one fatten up quickly when food was available, since long stretches of food scarcity were inevitable. But once modern society changed our access to food, the thrifty genes were no longer needed, but were still active. And that's what a lot of us deal with now. Going through that 21-day detox that I just went through, every time I go through that 21-day detox, it amazes me how little food we actually need. You can have a shake for breakfast, a shake for lunch, and eat a salad for dinner for the first 11 days with some vegetables and be completely fine. And once you get your body into that mode, your body works really good in that mode. You just we don't need so much food. And we have so much food that it causes problems for us. They helped one fatten up quickly when food was available. Yeah. But once modern society changed our access to food, the thrift genes were no longer needed, but were still active, essentially preparing us for a famine that never comes. That makes total sense. Our body's expecting the famine to come, but it never comes. That's why a lot of times people do really well when they do some intermittent fasting. It's not the same thing as the famine, but it. I'll tell you, with watching my dad die a couple weeks ago, he just decided he was going to quit eating And he didn't decide he was going to quit eating. He was ready to go, and he just decided I'm not going to eat. On about day 4, day 5, after he quit eating, almost all the inflammation that he had in his body started to go away. Like he could have got up and walked after day 4 or 5. He didn't, and he just went on through with the process because he'd already made up his mind that he wasn't gonna keep this thing going. But the the he went through a fasting stage, which calmed his body down. Um, it is believed that our thrifty genes are responsible for the obesity epidemic too, which is closely tied to diabetes. So down here, the Framingham Heart Study referenced in the first chapter of the book, which identified a linear association between total cholesterol and cognitive performance. I want you to be aware of what I'm about to say, and I'm not saying it. So all of you haters out there who say this crazy chiropractor is talking about cholesterol, no, I'm not. I'm just reading a book. I'm just reading a book from a medical doctor, board certified neurologist. So got all the licensors in the world, right? I'm just going to read what he says. The Framingham Heart Study referenced in this first chapter identified a linear association between total cholesterol and cognitive performance. It's just the tip of the iceberg. In the fall of 2012, a report in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease published research from the Mayo Clinic revealing that older people who fill their plates with carbohydrates have nearly 4 times the risk of developing mild cognitive impairment. Let me read that again. This is from the Mayo Clinic. Older people who fill their plates with carbohydrates have nearly 4 times the risk of developing mild cognitive impairment, generally considered a precursor to Alzheimer's disease. Signs of mild cognitive impairment include problems with memory, language, thinking, and judgment. This particular study found that those whose diets were highest in healthy fats, listen to this, those whose diets were highest in healthy fats were 42% less likely to experience cognitive impairment. People who had the highest intake of protein from healthy sources like chicken, meat, and fish enjoyed a reduced risk of 21%. When you fill your plate with spaghetti and enchiladas and all of those refined carbohydrates that are that cause insulin and all the problems to happen, you increase your chances of Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment dramatically, and 4 times as likely to have that. Earlier studies examining patterns in diets and risk for dementia unveiled similar findings. One of the first studies to really compare the difference in fat content between an Alzheimer's brain and a healthy brain was published in 1998. In this postmortem study, researchers in the Netherlands found that the Alzheimer's patient had significantly reduced amounts of fat, notably cholesterol and free fatty acids, in their cerebrospinal fluid than did the controls. This was true regardless of whether the Alzheimer's patient had the defective gene known as the ApoE4 that predisposes people to the disease. Now we know about that. If you have stuck with me since the beginning, the very first book that we reviewed on Wednesday night, I believe, was The End of Alzheimer's by Dale Bredesen. And Dale breaks down this whole idea of he's the first one that I learned about ApoE4 from. And you might increase your chances of Alzheimer's disease with by increasing your number of ApoE4 genes. But what Dr. Perlmutter is saying is, regardless of whether you have Alzheimer's and the defective gene, you still had less of this, right? In 2007, the Journal of Neurology published a study that looked at more than 8,000 participants who were 65 years or older and had totally normal brain function. 8,000 people. This is the Journal of Neurology. The study followed them up for 4 years, during which some 280 people developed a form of dementia. Most of the 280 were diagnosed with Alzheimer's. The researchers aimed to identify patterns in their dietary habits, homing in on their consumption of fish, which contains lots of brain and heart-healthy omega-3 fats. For people who never consumed fish, listen to this one. I'll say it again for you. I said it last night quite passionately, but I'm not going to say it passionately tonight because I'm just reading what Dr. Perlmutter says. For people who never consumed fish, the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease during the 4-year follow-up period was increased by 37%. 1 in 3, right? In those individuals who consumed fish on a daily basis, the risk of these diseases was reduced by 44%. Regular users of butter had no significant changes in their risk for dementia or Alzheimer's, but people who regularly consumed omega-3 rich oils such as olive, flax, and walnut oil were 60% less likely to develop dementia, and those who did not regularly consume such oils. They were 60% less likely to develop dementia. Dr. Perlmutter is one of the guys that taught me this stuff, along with Dr. Murphy and Dr. Hyman and the rest of those guys. The fish oil makes significant difference in your health. I know you get tired of me saying it, but it makes us 60% less likely to develop dementia. The researchers also found that people who regularly ate omega-6 rich oils, typically in the American diet, but not omega-3 rich oils or fish, were twice as likely to develop dementia as people who didn't eat omega-6 rich oils. Interestingly, the report showed that consumption of omega-3 oils actually counterbalanced the detrimental effect of the omega-6 oils and cautioned against eating omega-6 oils in the absence of omega-3s. I find results like this to be quite stunning and informative. And I'll read this little inset part right here. We hear so much of these days about omega-3s and omega-6 fats. Overall, omega-6 fats fall under the, quote, bad fat category. They are somewhat pro-inflammatory, and there is evidence that higher consumption of these fats is related to brain disorder. Unfortunately, the American diet is extremely high in omega-6 fats, which are found in many vegetable oils, including safflower oil, corn oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, and soybean oil. Vegetable oils represents the number one source of fat in the American diet. According to anthropological research, our hunter-gatherer ancestors consumed omega-6 and omega-3 fats in a ratio of roughly 1-to-1. It's exactly the same thing I said last night when I was breaking down the 6-3 ratio. That historically, we believe that it was a 1-to-1 ratio inside the body. Today, we consume 10 to 25 times more omega-6 fats than evolutionary norms, and we've dramatically reduced our intake of healthy brain-boosting omega-3 fats. Some experts believe our increased consumption of brain-healthy omega-3 fatty acids was responsible for the threefold increase in the size of the human brain. The following chart lists the omega-6 and omega-3 content of various vegetable oils. So canola oil has 20% omega-6 content and 9% omega-3. Corn oil has 54% omega-6 content and 0% omega-3. Cottonseed has 50% omega-6 to 0% omega-3. And you think to yourself, and as crazy as it is, nobody, I've been living in Lubbock since we moved here in the fall of 1990. I've never seen anybody stop on the highway ever. I've never even heard about a field trip with little kids going out there to the middle of a cotton field and eating cotton. I've never seen a human being, maybe they do it in some small town somewhere. I've never even heard of it before. But why do we eat cottonseed? Because we're trying to take what's left over and make some money, make some oil out of it. And if you'll go to any Stop and Shop or any gas station or anywhere, Buc-ee's or wherever you want to go to in America, as far as I know, and you try to buy some almonds, just go in there and get you some almonds. They're going to be covered in cottonseed oil. So it doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Fish oil is 0% content of omega-6 and 100% omega-3. Flaxseed is 14 to 57 omega-3. Peanuts, 32% omega-6s. Safflower, 75% to 0 omega-6s. Sesame, 42% omega-6s to 0 omega-3. Soybean, 51% to 7. Sunflower, 65% to 0. Walnuts, 52% omega-6 to 10% omega-3. Seafood is a wonderful source of omega-3 fatty acids, and even wild meat like beef, lamb, venison, and buffalo contain this fabulous fat. But a caveat to consider, if animals are fed grains, usually corn and soybeans, then they will not have adequate omega-3s in their diets, and their meat will be deficient in these vital nutrients. Hence the call for consuming grass-fed beef and wild fish. I know you guys have heard that from me about 400 times, but now you've heard it from Dr. Perlmutter. Beyond dementia and other neurological issues we have associated with low fat intake and cholesterol levels in particular, in a recent report published by the National Institutes of Health, researchers compared memory function in elder individuals to cholesterol levels. They found that people who did not suffer from dementia had much better memory if they had higher levels of cholesterol. So when we get back from this break, we'll talk about cholesterol. We'll be right back. So when you start studying health, you start reading these books. I've had these books for a long time. And you start reading these books, and what you find out is that there's a bunch of crap. Just like the metformin thing, right? That we talked about last night, how metformin destroys the respiration in the mitochondrial respiration in the liver cell. Well, the same thing, the statin drugs, and not according to me, I'll read it right here and let Dr. Perlmutter say the same thing, but the statin drugs are garbage. And there's the research of bringing your cholesterol level down is garbage. And that's what I try to tell all my people. They got 230, 240 level of cholesterol, and they're worried to death because they got to get their cholesterol under 200. Or the opposite things happen. They'll come in the office and brag about they've got their cholesterol under 200. And it's like, dude, you're not making yourself any healthier. And I'm fixing to read it to you. Not according to my research, according to Dr. Perlmutter. The National Institutes of Health researchers compared memory function in elderly individuals to cholesterol levels. They found that people who did not suffer from dementia had much better memory function, that's obvious, if they had high levels of cholesterol. The conclusion of the report crisply stated, high cholesterol is associated with better memory function. Now, I know you guys out there listening have been told for years and years and years, you got to get your cholesterol down. And it's based on faulty science from a guy named Ansel Keys, and then the government got involved, and I'm fixing to read it to you as soon as we get back from this break. Okay, hang on. I'll get us back. Okay, everybody. So basically, that National Institutes of Health research says high cholesterol is associated with better memory function. In the discussion that followed, the researchers indicated it is possible that individuals who survived beyond age 85, especially those with high cholesterol, may be more robust. Parkinson's disease is also strongly related to low levels of cholesterol. Researchers in the Netherlands, writing in the American Journal of Epidemiology, published a report in 2006 demonstrating that, quote, higher serum levels of total cholesterol were associated with a significantly decreased risk of Parkinson's disease with evidence of a dose-effect relation, end quote. In fact, more recent research in 2008, published in the journal Movement Disorders, showed that people with lower LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, were at increased risk for Parkinson's disease by approximately 350%. This is from Whole Grain Truth, Attention Carbs and Fat Phobics, page 77 of the Grain Brain. It says it right here. That people with lowest LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, were at an increased risk of Parkinson's disease by approximately 350%. To understand how this could possibly be true, it helps to recall what I hinted in at the first chapter about LDL being a carrier of proteins that's not necessarily bad. The fundamental role of LDL in the brain is to capture life-giving cholesterol and transport it to the neuron where it performs critically important functions. As we have now seen, when cholesterol levels are low, the brain simply doesn't work well, and individuals are at a significant increased risk for neurological problems as a consequence. But a caveat, once free radical damage of the LDL molecule, once free radicals damage the LDL molecule, it's rendered much less capable of delivering cholesterol to the brain. In addition to oxidation destroying the LDL function, sugar can also render it dysfunctional by binding to it and accelerating oxidation. And when that happened, LDL is no longer able to enter the astrocyte, a cell charged with nourishing neurons. In the last 10 years, new research has shown that oxidized LDL is a key factor in the development of atherosclerosis. Hence, we should do everything we can to reduce the risk of LDL oxidation, not necessarily levels of LDL itself. A principal player in the risk of oxidation is high levels of glucose. High levels of glucose oxidize the LDLs, and then that causes a problem for us. It's the glucose, it's not the fats. LDL is far more likely to become oxidized in the presence of sugar molecules that will bind to it and change its shape. Glycosylated proteins, which are the products of these reactions between proteins and sugar molecules, are associated with a 50-fold increase in free radical formation as compared to non-glycosylated proteins. LDL is not the enemy. The problem occurs when a higher carbohydrate diet yields oxidized LDL and an increased risk of atherosclerosis. In addition, if and when LDL becomes glycosylated molecule, it cannot present cholesterol to the brain cells and brain function suffers. Somehow we have been led to believe that dietary fat will raise our cholesterol, which in turn increase our risk for heart attacks and strokes. This notion continues to prevail despite research from 19 years ago that proved otherwise. In 1994, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a trial that compared older adults with high cholesterol levels above 240 milligrams per deciliter to those with normal levels below 200 milligrams. Over the course of 4 years, researchers at Yale University measured total cholesterol and high-density lipoprotein, your HDL, in almost 1,000 participants. They also tracked hospitalizations for heart attack and unstable angina and the rates of death from heart disease and from other cause. No differences were found between these two groups. People with low total cholesterol had as many heart attacks and died just as frequently as those with high cholesterol. And a review of multiple large studies have routinely failed to find correlation between cholesterol levels and heart disease. Mounting research like this has prompted Dr. George Mann, a researcher with the Framingham Heart Study, to go on the record stating, the diet heart hypotheses that suggest that high intake of fat or cholesterol causes heart disease has been repeatedly shown to be wrong. And yet, for complicated reasons of pride, profit, and prejudice, the hypothesis continues to be exploited by scientists, fundraising enterprises, food companies, and even governmental agencies. The public is being deceived by the greatest health scam of the century. Nothing could be further from the truth than the myth that we lower our cholesterol levels, we might have greater chance of living longer and healthier lives. That's not me, that's Dr. Perlmutter. In a recent report appearing in the prestigious medical journal Lancet, researchers from the Netherlands studied 724 elderly individuals whose average age was 89 years and followed them for 10 years. What they found was truly extraordinary. During the study, 642 participants died. Each 39-point increase in total cholesterol corresponded to a 15% decrease in mortality risk. Let me read it again. Each 39-point increase in total cholesterol. If your total cholesterol went up 39 points, you had a 15% decrease in mortality. In the study, there was absolutely no difference in the risk of dying from coronary artery disease between high versus low cholesterol groups, which is incredible when you consider the number of elderly folks who are taking powerful cholesterol-lowering drugs. Other common causes of death in the elderly were found to be dramatically associated with lower cholesterol. The authors reported mortality from cancer and infection was significantly lower among participants in the highest total cholesterol category than the other categories. Let me read it again. Mortality from cancer and infection was significantly lower among the participants in the highest total cholesterol category than in other categories, which largely explains the lower all-cause mortality in this category. In other words, people with the highest total cholesterol were less likely to die from cancer and infections, common fatal illness in older folks, than those with lower cholesterol levels. In fact, when you compare the lowest and highest cholesterol groups, the risk of dying during the study was reduced by a breathtaking 48% in those who had the highest cholesterol. High cholesterol can extend longevity. Are you getting that from your medical doctors on a daily basis? Or are they telling you that you got to get on a statin drug, which decreases your testosterone, which decreases your CoQ10, which decreases other hormones in your body? We've gone through the statin metabolism before, right? And for what reason? What reason do you need to lower your cholesterol? How about lowering your glucose? How about stop eating refined carbohydrates, right? Perhaps this goes back to the book right here. Perhaps one of the most extraordinary studies performed on the positive impact of cholesterol in the entire neurological system is a 2008 report published in the Journal of Neurology, which describes high cholesterol as a protective factor in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. There is no meaningful treatment for ALS, a devastating disease that I deal with in my medical practice on a daily basis. ALS is a chronic degenerative disorder of the body's motor neurons that leads to death within 2 to 5 years of onset. The FDA has approved one medication, Rilutech, that may extend life by approximately 3 months at best, but it is very expensive and toxic to the liver. Most patients refuse to take it. In this study from French investigators, however, it has shown that individuals with considerably higher cholesterol ratios lived on average 1 year longer than patients with lower levels when compared with normal controls. As the author stated, hyperlipidemia, high levels of cholesterol, is a significant prognostic factor for survival of patients with ALS. Yeah. In 2010, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published an astonishing study that revealed the truth behind urban legend about fat, especially the saturated kind, and heart disease. The study was a retrospective evaluation of 21 previous medical reports involving more than 340,000 subjects followed from periods of 5 to 23 years. It concluded that intake of saturated fat was not associated with an increased risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, or cardiovascular disease. In comparing the lowest to the highest consumption of saturated fat, the actual risk for coronary heart disease was 19% lower in the group consuming the highest amounts of saturated fat. The authors also stated, our results suggest a publication bias which that studies such that studies with significant association tend to be received more favorably for publication. What the authors are implying is that when other studies presented conclusions that were more familiar with the mainstream, fat causes heart disease, not to mention more attractive to big pharma, they were more likely to get published. The truth is that we thrive on saturated fats. In the words of Michael Gurr, PhD, Gurr, author of Lipid Biochemistry, An Introduction, whatever causes coronary heart disease, it is not primarily a high intake of saturated fatty acids. In a subsequent report from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, a panel of leading researchers in the field of nutrition from around the globe clearly stated, at present, there is no clear relationship of saturated fatty acid intake to these outcomes of obesity, cardiovascular disease, incidence of cancer, and osteoporosis. The researchers went on to say that research should be directed at biological interactions between insulin resistance, reflected by obesity and physical inactivity, and carbohydrate quality and quantity. Before we look at more studies showing the benefits of fat, especially cholesterol-rich foods, let's consider how we got to this point. So he goes into the whole history of the thing, and I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. It just talks about, if you're like most Americans, at some point in your life, you've eaten more margarine than butter. Felt like you were splurging when you polished off a plate of red meat, eggs, and cheese, and gravitated towards products that said low-fat, non-fat, or cholesterol-free. I don't blame you for making these choices. We are all members of the same society that relies on, quote, experts to tell us what food is good and conversely bad for us. We've lived through historic events in our understanding in human health over the past several generations, as well as momentous discoveries about what makes us sick. So he goes through that. He talks about rural families living and working on farms probably ate more calories. Theirs was diet filled with butter, eggs, meats, grains, and seasonable fruits and vegetables. A few Americans were overweight, and three most common causes of death were pneumonia, tuberculosis, and diarrhea. And it was around the turn of the 20th century that the Department of Agriculture began to keep track of food trends, not a change in consumption of the kind of fats Americans were eating. People were beginning to use vegetable oils instead of butter, which prompted food manufacturers to create hardened oils through the hydrogenated process so they resembled butter. By 1950, we had gone from eating about 18 pounds of butter and a little under 3 pounds of vegetable oils each year to just over 10 pounds of butter and more than 10 pounds of vegetable oils. Margin was rapidly gaining ground in our diets too. At the turn of the century, people consumed only 2 pounds per person per year, but by mid-century, people were eating around 8 pounds. And this is where he gets into the Ansel Keys. Although the so-called lipid hypothesis has been around since the mid-19th century, it wasn't until the mid-20th century that scientists tried to correlate a fatty diet to fatty arteries, as death from coronary artery disease began to climb. According to the hypothesis, saturated animal fats raise blood cholesterol levels and lead to the deposition of cholesterol in other fats as plaque in the arteries. To bolster this theory, a University of Minnesota public health researcher named Ansel Keys showed a nearly direct correlation between calories from fat in the diets and death from heart disease among populations across 7 countries. But he ignored countries that didn't fit the pattern, including many where people eat a lot of fat but don't get heart disease, and others where the diets are low in fat, yet their populations have high incidence of fatal heart attacks. The Japanese, whose diet have only 10% of calories coming from fat, showed the lowest coronary artery disease mortality, less than 1 in 1,000. The United States, on the other hand, had the highest coronary artery disease mortality, 7 in 1,000, with 40% of its calories coming from fat. On the surface, it would seem that these patterns point directly to the idea that fat is bad and that fat causes heart disease. Little did scientists know that when these numbers weren't telling the whole story. This erroneous thinking persisted, however, for the next several decades as researchers looked for more proof, which included Framingham Heart Study, which found that people with higher cholesterol were more likely to be diagnosed with coronary artery disease and die from it. In 1956, the American Heart Association began pushing the prudent diet, which called for the replacing of butter, lard, eggs, and beef with margarine, corn oil, chicken, and cold cereal. By the 1970s, the lipid hypothesis had become well established. At the heart of the hypothesis was the unyielding claim that cholesterol causes coronary artery disease. This is where the government gets involved in our food. And the government is pushed by lobbies. The lobbies push the government. They push all that stuff. So the corn growers send their lobbies. The chiropractors send their lobbies. The lobbyists. The pharmaceutical companies send their lobbyists. All these people are going to go lobby. All the people, all my farmers have a lobby. All my cotton people have a lobby. All of my cattle growers have a lobby, right? They all have lobbyists, and they're all going to go. And now the government. Now what are you going to do? You got people in your place back home. Our representatives are represented by people who run hospitals. During COVID, I had to listen to that garbage every week of our mayor having a conversation with the CEO of the hospital who told me that it was my responsibility as a West Texan to get vaccinated. I had a duty and a responsibility, and that I was not, because I wasn't vaccinated, I was holding the other people hostage. That came from the CEO of one of our major hospitals here in Lubbock. That's why I'm here with you today on the radio, because I went all the way there. When he said I was holding the people hostage, it was hogwash. I was like, why don't you go talk to Dr. Perlmutter about how we ought to handle this problem? Why are you talking to that guy? You know why you're talking to that guy? Because that guy's got lobby power. That's why you're talking to him. Why those lines that we saw during COVID, those lines of people like parked to go get their test. What was the incentive of that? The incentive of that was not for spread of the virus. Hogwash. People were in those lines so that if they got tested positive, they could go home for 2 weeks, regardless of whether they were sick or not. Like that entire thing. And I want to know, and I haven't seen any of our people from the hospital. We had parking lots full of testers. Were we testing those people because we wanted them to be healthy, or did we test those people because we were making money from those tests? Right? Well, this is the same thing that happens to our diet, and here's where the government gets involved. And I'm going back to the book. Sorry about that aside right there. This naturally motivated the government to do something. The government tells me what I should eat, right? No. Which led to the release of dietary goals in the United States by the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Health Needs in 1977. As you can imagine, the goals aimed to lower fat intake and avoid foods high in cholesterol. Artery clogging, saturated fats were deemed especially bad. So down went meat, milk, eggs, butter, cheese, and tropical oils such as coconut and palm oil. This perspective also paved the way for the billion-dollar drug industry focusing on lipid-lowering medications. I didn't say that. That's Dr. Perlmutter saying that. At the same time, health authorities began to advise people to replace these now bad fats with carbohydrates and processed polyunsaturated vegetable oils, including soybean, corn, cottonseed, canola, peanut, safflower, and sunflower. Fast food restaurants followed suit in the mid-1980s with switching from beef fat and palm oil to partially hydrogenated fats, vegetable oils, and fry their food. Even though the U.S. Department of Agriculture has since converted its food guide from a pyramid to a plate, it still communicates the idea that fat is bad and carbs are good. In fact, the new My Plate doesn't feature fats at all, making it very confusing for consumers to know how fat fits in to a healthy diet and which kind. This is great. This is what I'm talking about right here. The Dietary Goals of the United States by the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs in 1977. I was born in 1970. My dad was born in 1943. 53, 63. He was 27 years old. He was 26 years old when I was born. My mom was 24 years old when I was born. My parents are the generation. My uncle, my grandpa lived to be 84 years old, but his first three sons have all died at 80 or younger. He's got one shot left. He's got one son left to see if his son can outlive him. How come these three men couldn't outlive their old grandpa, their old daddy, my grandpa? Because my grandpa was a hard-working man all the way through life, but he was eating lard and fat and protein. And this generation that we've gotten into, we've got this generation that got lied to, that in the 1970s, they lied to us and they changed our food supply, and we've been fighting it ever since. We don't understand it. Dr. Donald Middle, cardiac surgeon and professor of surgery at the University of Washington, stated it perfectly in his 2010 essay entitled Health Benefits of Low Carbohydrate, High Saturated Fat Diet. The 60-year reign of the low-fat, high-carb diet will end. This will happen when the health-destroying effects of excess carbohydrates in the diet becomes more widely recognized and the health benefits of saturated fats are better appreciated. The lipid hypothesis dominated cardiovascular circles for decades, despite the facts that the number of contradictory studies exceeds those that are supportive. And he goes on to talk about that. And then we get into what happens with blood sugar. Carbs set fire to the brain through surges in blood sugar. This has a direct negative effect on the brain that starts the inflammatory cascade. The science really comes down to your body's neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are your main mood brain regulators, and when your blood sugar increases, there's an immediate depletion of the neurotransmitters serotonin, epinephrine, norepinephrine, GABA, and dopamine. At the same time, B-complex vitamins, which are needed to make these neurotransmitters and a few hundred other things, get used up. What was our last supplement? Our B-complex, right? They get used up. Magnesium levels also diminish, and this handicaps both your nervous system and your liver. In addition, high blood sugar triggers a reaction called glycation, which we'll explore later. A biological process where glucose, proteins, and certain fats become tangled together, causing tissues to become stiff. Aside from sweetened beverages, grain-based foods are responsible for the bulk of carbohydrates, calories in the American diet. Man, we're going to have to do some more of this, but because they didn't get to vitamin D. I didn't get to the AD. Certain vitamins, notably A, D, E, and K, require fat to get absorbed properly in the body, which is why dietary fat is necessary to support these fat-soluble vitamins. And then we'll get into the whole cholesterol thing and statins. It's a good book. It's a Grain Brain. It's by David Perlmutter. We've run out of time tonight, but I hope some of this stuff helps you out so that maybe you can understand a little bit more about nutrition and feel better about eating foods that are really good for your brain. So if you want to check him out, go check him out. Maybe we'll talk about cholesterol and antibiotics somewhere down the road. But hey, that's the end of the show. I hope you guys have a great evening. We'll see you guys back here on Monday night.